What's going on, everybody? It's your boy at Big Game James _36. I'm here with Greg McGarrity, and this is the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl Drive to Selection presented by Toyota. Each week we go through college football, what happened. We kind of preview the week ahead of us, and then we talk about how it affects and relates to the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl that's going to be played December 29th here in Jacksonville, Florida at noon. What's going on, Greg? How are you doing?
Doing great. It was a great weekend, right?
It was an amazing weekend, especially for me. I love when my alma mater can beat rivals, especially when you haven't won in like 8 years.
Right.
So doesn't matter. All you need is one. So with this year, but let's kind of go back over the past weekend. What were some of the games that you were tracking, and kind of what were your thoughts on those?
Well, everybody was looking at the Clemson FSU game because Clemson. You know, we talked about this last week. If they have 2 losses before really October 1st, and they've got a big game this weekend at Syracuse, it's the first time that they've been out of the running for a number of years before October even starts. So that game drew a lot of eyeballs. And then on the SEC side, a lot of people were watching Texas A&M, Auburn. I think a lot of eyeballs there, and Ole Miss, Alabama. And Alabama kind of righted the ship there. So those are really the premier games. I mean, Notre Dame, even though they're not eligible for our bowl, I think everybody in the country saw that game and saw the way it ended. But again, Notre Dame's not eligible to be in our bowl this year, but certainly it was one of the best games of the year.
But it lines up, too, for other things. Notre Dame plays Duke. They also have Louisville in a couple weeks. 2 teams that we are tracking here. Again, we talked about last week, and you brought this up, and I wasn't even aware of this, that the ACC had 7 undefeated teams. Now it's 6. That looks good for us as a Gator Bowl, as the ACC seems to have a strong conference going into the early part of the season.
Well, we're getting into the season now, deep into the season, and some schools haven't even played a conference game right now. So that will end this week, except Miami doesn't play an ACC opponent. They're going to go 8 weeks straight in ACC play. So you're going to see some of the teams, almost everyone, now getting into conference play, which we'll start to see some separation after this week, because some teams will kind of play themselves out of a bowl, and some schools will play themselves up and possibly up into the college football playoff New Year's Day 6. But certainly there'll be a little separation beginning after this weekend.
Sticking with the ACC, and that was an interesting point that you brought up about Miami. Actually, before we get into that, how difficult is that? Because now you're playing 8 teams that kind of know you, because conferences typically have styles, and styles make fights. So playing somebody week in and week out in your conference for high stakes, how is that? That's got to be a bit difficult.
Well, especially in the ACC this year, you're going 8 games in a row. I think in a perfect world, you'd like to play 6 games, take a break, finish the season with 6 games. But, you know, it's kind of odd having 4 games taking a break, and then you've got 8. That's going to be one heck of a grind for any school to play that many games in a row. So certainly they'll be able to rest up this week and then try to get after it. But you're seeing in the SEC, you know, Missouri has their first SEC game this week against Vanderbilt. So don't sleep on Missouri. They've got a really good team. They're ranked now. But again, they haven't played an SEC game until they're at Vanderbilt this weekend, which they should be favored to win.
Going in here back to the ACC, we have Florida State at the top. We have Louisville at the top. Both teams have played 2 ACC opponents. But we know if those are the top 2 teams, those teams are more than likely going to play in the ACC championship. And if they both remain undefeated, one's going to probably go to the college football playoff. The other one will go to the Orange Bowl. But in relation, about where are the teams that we're looking at that will probably be coming to Jacksonville from out of the ACC? What number to what number?
I think if you took the top 8 and also Clemson, I think those would be the 9 teams that you're looking at. I think some of the teams, we can't take Wake Forest because they were in our game 2 years ago. So the other teams will struggle a little bit to become bowl eligible. But certainly I would think the top 8 teams on the board now plus Clemson would be in play for our game.
So Clemson, I should have started off and forgot about it. I actually went to Clemson, Florida State with the Chairman's Club, which is something that people really should do some research on. I got a chance to rock my green jacket. I'm going to tell you this much. The green jacket has its powers. It gets you in the doors. It gets you on the field. It gets you in places. As long as green jacket, slacks, and some Jordans, and walking with purpose will get you places that you wouldn't normally get. But it was a very fun experience. One thing I want to say is the people at Clemson, great, just so nice. A guy actually walked me all the way up to where I was supposed to get to because he pointed, and I said, okay, good. He's like, no, I want to make sure you guys get there. So he followed us there. Fortunately, the guy had a heart attack the year before, and I was just like, dude, I don't want you to have a heart attack on me trying to help me. But Death Valley, going down the hill, such a great atmosphere, man. I like that. It's one of the best treats that I've had in this is getting able to do that. So if you don't know what Chairman's Club is, ask a question in the comments, find out about it, ask somebody, trust me. You want the green jacket with the big Tax Slayer logo on it. Going to the SEC, we had some separate. Alabama kind of looks like they're righting the ship a little bit. Milroe played a little bit better than he played before. Looked rocky at first, but Georgia still looks like they're Georgia. They're just better than everybody they played. Florida kind of took a step down. What are some other teams in the SEC that we should be kind of looking for over the next coming weeks as they go through conference play?
Well, Kentucky's off to a great start. That's going to be a very interesting game to watch. They play at noon in Lexington this week, and then next week Kentucky travels to Athens. So we'll know more about Kentucky as we get down the year, but the West side is really going to be definitive this week. Ole Miss, LSU. Ole Miss after coming off that Alabama game, they're at home against LSU. And then Arkansas, Texas A&M. Arkansas can ill afford to lose 2 games in the SEC because they lost last week to LSU. They need to get back on track, or their track to the Western Division Championship is really going to suffer because, again, 2 losses on either side, the East or West, make it difficult to advance to Atlanta.
Yeah, as I always say, the SEC West, toughest conference in college football. They look like they're just going to beat each other up, even though Kentucky, Florida, and Georgia all being undefeated in conference. Florida with the 1 loss does look pretty good. We got some new predictions, a new week, new predictions. Any of the ones out here stand out that have changed that wasn't there before?
Yeah, I think USA, who had Duke and Tennessee, they totally flipped to Louisville versus Ole Miss, which would be a great offensive game there. But really, I think you look at any of those matchups and you would say, let's go play today. I think CBS's prediction with Mississippi State. Mississippi State's got a huge game. You know, they'll be favored to lose, or they'll predicted to lose to Alabama this weekend. Tough road to hoe, especially Alabama may gain some traction and get going. But certainly there's some great brands on the board that have a great chance to advance to Jacksonville.
I think Miami being able to come here would be a great bowl game for them, considering they haven't really had much bowl success and they haven't had really good winning seasons. Mario's been doing a really good job this year. But as you talked about, they're going into conference play, 8 straight games in conference. Very difficult, especially when you have Clemson, Duke, Florida State, and Louisville all on that schedule. That's 4 really tough ones right there. You got Louisville, Tennessee, which should be good, but Louisville, Ole Miss, as you talked about. But then you brought up right before we got here the Spurrier Bowl.
Yeah.
Duke versus Florida.
Yeah.
That would be a really, really interesting matchup. Florida should be happy again, considering it's they were in Vegas last year, so I guess you really can't cry too much about being in Vegas. But being here, playing Duke, this would be one of the better bowl games that Duke's been to in a while, in quite some time. So, are there any of those games? I think we know Notre Dame can't come.
Right.
They keep putting Texas A&M, but really probably no.
That'd be a stretch. There would have to be some crazy things happen, I think, for A&M to come back after they were not able to play a couple of years ago. But you brought up Duke, Florida. I think that would be an intriguing game, just like last year with Lou Holtz with South Carolina and Notre Dame. We weren't able to get Coach Holtz here to kind of flip the coin or what have you, but I promise you, if we had Duke and Florida in that game, Coach Spurrier would be here to maybe add to the pageantry. So I may be keeping my fingers crossed. That may be a game that works out for us.
That'd be fun. It'll be, again, Duke's got a really good coach, and at the time, probably if he keeps doing what he's doing, may not even be the coach there, just the way that college football kind of goes. But obviously, the old ball coach would also add a little bit of spice and seasoning to any kind of bowl game. So things are shaping up. College football, probably one of the more exciting years that we've had in a while. At least more balanced. Could be because of transfer portal, could be because of a bunch of other different things. And since I have you here, what kind of interesting dynamic do you think the transfer portal does bring to college football, and has it really enhanced parity?
Well, it's like plug and play. If you have deficiencies, you can take care of those pretty quickly, as long as you've got a strong NIL program in place, because I'm sure it gets into, really, call it what it is, a bidding process of where should a young person go. And certainly if they can fill a need for a school and the money's right, and I hate to say that in college sports, as long as the money's right, that can change the dynamics for a program. But I don't think you can sustain that year after year after year. I think it's a stopgap. I think you still have to go through the traditional way of developing players and getting the freshmen on campus. I think that's the true formula for longevity and success, as opposed to maybe a plug and play for 1 year. But we'll see. It's still early in the process, and we'll see how that dynamic plays out. But it certainly has lifted schools to prominence a lot quicker than the other way that we used to do it through the high school ranks.
I think suspension of APR has a lot to do with that as well, because now you're not really, if they graduate, great. If they don't, it doesn't matter. You can kind of just get rid of them when you want to.
Yeah.
But that and conference realignment is going to probably be two of the most interesting things over the next decade. But at least it hasn't messed up the level of play.
Right.
Looks fun. A lot of people are going out here, a lot of interesting games. Any games this upcoming week that we need to be looking forward to in relation to the Gator Bowl?
I think the Clemson game at Syracuse is a big game for both schools, obviously. So that could be a determining factor for both those schools, their viability to play in here. But you talked about how many great teams. Just think if you had the 12-team playoff this year, because I think you take the top 10 in the polls at this point in time, and some matchups that could develop there. I think you're seeing what could happen next year. This year, obviously, there's just 4. But it just shows you with NIL, with the transfer portal, all these things come into play, you could really be not very good 1 year and really good the next year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in this year, but certainly it bodes well for the future of an expanded playoff when you have so many teams that are competitive.
Yeah, going to the Clemson-Syracuse game like that. That Syracuse is Clemson's version of what Florida State and Boston College go through. They just play them tough. And Dino Babers is a really good coach. Like every few years, everybody's like, all right, they're going to fire him. He's going to get rid of it. Then all of a sudden, boom, it just goes out, starts off hot, and he can dial it up and scheme it up. So, again, Clemson, we talked about, could be out of the college football playoff discussion and the ACC. Right. But if things are kind of troubling, they haven't been in this place in a while, they could be really pushing themselves out of even a big bowl game if they don't get it right.
Yeah, and you've got other teams that are moving forward, and you're talking about teams that traditionally aren't playing up in better bowls. I mean, you've got Georgia Tech, who's had a big win at Wake Forest. You've got like I mentioned them. You've got Louisville's in play, Miami's back, Duke. I mean, you've got some teams that aren't sort of the brands that have carried the ACC for years in play now. So I think it bodes well for the consistency you're seeing this year in the ACC.
All right. Which bodes well for us here in Jacksonville at the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. So, again, appreciate you guys for joining us. I'm at Big Game James _36. This is Greg McGarrity, and this is the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl's Drive to Selection, presented by Toyota. Each week, we're going to come to you, talk about college football in the past, talk about the future is going in, as long as it relates to Jacksonville and Gator Bowl. You guys have a nice weekend.